Welcome back. This is Daybreak. Thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. This morning we are taking stock of the devolved system of governance and the fundamental questions that come with that. Kivutha Kibwana is the former governor, Makueni County, on my immediate right. Gishira Kibara is the former principal secretary. Dr. Kipkurui Chepkoni, the CEO of the Intergovernmental Relations Technical Committee, and FCPA Ahmed Abdullahi, Governor Wajir County and the Vice Chair of the Council of Governors. Gentlemen, thank you for your time here. Governor Kibwana, coming to you. The Principal Secretary, former, has mentioned issues in regards to accountability, wastefulness and effectiveness in terms of service delivery. And to just point this out, when you came to power in 2013, you first faced more or less what was a political storm at the County Assembly, and the county nearing a dissolution by the then President Uhuru Kenyatta because of the crisis. And we are seeing similar instances that are cropping up in Embu County. A whole political cycle ended up in courts of law, ending in favor of the former governor. Then we had Marsabit County, and nearly this was about the deadly politically instigated conflict along clan lines, and recently we had seen Kawira Mwangaza. Such situations have an impact on service delivery. Is it talking about the advantages that come with devolution? Such is also a move that stalls or delays service delivery for the people. And what do you think is the antidote to the cases that are mushrooming of impeachments after impeachments of governors?
Again, before maybe I answer that very, very direct question, let me just comment a little about the question of the services which should be done by the national level and the county level. One of the things that didn't happen at the onset of devolution was the costing of the functions, so that it becomes clear how much money, funds, resources should go to each function. So up to date, that has not happened. And so when we say that so much money will go to the counties for these functions, it is not exactly clear how that happens. Again, also the unbundling of functions, particularly for the concurrent functions to do with disaster management, to do with museums, historical sites, to do with libraries, to do with betting. Again, determining what does the county do, what does the national government do. And so to really strengthen how people, what the counties will do, what the national government should do, that is something that requires to be concluded. Of course, we know for a fact that even for health, more money goes to the national level than the county governments. And yet, this is, in terms of implementation, this is a county issue.
And the nation is largely on policy issues.
Yes.
In terms of implementation, it's the county.
Precisely.
Yet more funding goes to the national government.
And very at the specialized level, like Kenyatta, Moi referral, those high end institutions. So that is something that requires to be tackled. And also one of the points that also arose in earlier discussion is the question of the disbursement of monies to counties. Actually, that on the whole, it takes about 3 months of delay. And therefore, even when they can't pay statutory dues, when they can't pay salaries and all that kind of stuff, and even the pending bills, sometimes the pending bills occur because they have not gotten the money to pay. So those are issues that require correction. And of course, the counties themselves have to do the valuation roles. Although 29 of them have advanced significantly in terms of valuation roles to make it possible what taxes they can levy, but only I think about less than 5 of implementing those new valuation roles. So that is something that they require to look at. And now coming directly to the question of the impeachments and so on, and I remember the former governor of Nairobi saying he had signed to transfer functions after he was given a lot of water and he was discomforted. But I think it is baffling sometimes to understand why senators and governors would be quarreling. Our county assemblies and the county executive would be quarreling. Our, MPs, the national level leadership in a county and the county leadership would be quarreling. So I think that is something where, in terms of the values we develop, in terms of how we coordinate, and how, therefore, we don't have those a deputy governor and a governor quarreling. That's something that baffles the mind, and that's something that we need to think about. It is true that there was a lot of benchmarking and people going to Mombasa, going to, where they would get a good per diem, or even sometimes going across to Arusha. Because now that's an international country. That's another country. And
the further away from the center,
you get more money. So those things, and even now the president is making measures to make it difficult for people to just go abroad. You carry so many people and stuff like that. So again, those are things that must be done so that you don't really waste resources. You make sure that resources go to what is absolutely necessary. But these impeachment things, impeachment problems, I think sometimes it's not fair because, like in my situation, they ask you for money. The county assembly asks you for money. You tell them that this money is available for development. It is not available for our own consumption. It's not our time to eat, so to speak. And they say, no, if you don't give us money, we are the ones who pass the budgets. We will dry you. We will not make anything available. So that again, as we have to go to another era where people realize that this money is available to be used for our people, not just to serve ourselves. So that there are no politically motivated impeachments. And I think it's also unfair. Although this matter is in court, like the Meru situation, how do you impeach somebody 3 months down, after 3 months of being a governor, you impeach them? Because 3 months, nobody has really begun to do the work, so to speak. So when that happens, you realize that this is motivated by other things, not the fact that this person is not working. And finally, to recall a member of parliament, to recall
the president, even to impeach the president, the threshold is...
The threshold, of course, is very high, but at least you can't recall an MP or an MCA before 2 years. But for governor, you can recall them even day one. So again, that needs to be looked at. And so we really must have good reasons for impeachment, so that, particularly constitutional reasons, so that we don't just make it a joke.
Yeah, okay. Yes, Governor. Coming to you, and by the way, to be clear, the governor does not bear, all the 47 governors don't bear the fiscal responsibility, because the Public Finance Management Act confers this responsibility on the chief officers for each department. And unless in written form or is given and anything on record, then that suffices. Coming to you then, Governor, it appears that then on the accountability and the wastefulness that the PS has mentioned, the ex-PS, on efficiency, whilst you have mentioned, for example, in your county, the first tarmac, that was during your first term, the increase in the number of healthcare workers and the expansion of healthcare programs, more can be done, is it, or achieved if resources can be better utilized across the devolved units and the realization of service delivery for the people?
Thank you, Ayub. Before I answer that, just going back to the issue of the question of functions and which have been devolved, which have not been devolved, and the resources following functions. In the first summit that we had, and I served in the first cohort of governors with Professor, even a basic review of the budget estimates then, when everything was still fresh, we made a case at the summit that for every 3 shillings that was due to devolution, 1 was still retained by the national government. And so it means the base that was used for division of revenue was wrong from the onset. And that base hasn't grown over time. It has not grown commensurate to the growth in the services. being delivered. Why? Because there's still a lot of duplication. The transfer of devolved functions should have shrunk the bureaucracy at the national level with respect to those functions. That didn't happen. And this is clear in the OCO report that was done in 2016-17, where even for health and agriculture, national government still employed more people than were devolved, so their payroll didn't go down. So, and the latest analysis by the IG, Intergovernmental Committee, actually has confirmed that there's as much as 272 billion relating to functions which are partially devolved, or elements of functions that have still been retained at the national level that ought to go to the counties. 272 billion is a lot of money, right? What we usually quarrel about in the division of revenue is much less than that. So you can imagine if 272 billion more was to go to the counties.
So we are talking about 672 billion.
Yeah, and this is their own analysis.
Yeah.
These functions were gazetted and the gazettement was rescinded. So I want to leave that at that. And you know, for functions like ECD, there was actually no unbundling to be done because there was no money allocated to that in the previous system.
Okay.
So more money should have been allocated, or fresh money should have been allocated. Now, on the issue of impeachment, to date we do not have an impeachment law. We do not have a subsidiary legislation that sets out threshold for impeachment. And governors are not a protected lot. And the toxicity of our politics is such that people serving at the other level of government, that this, you know, the national members of parliament and the like, can actually instigate an impeachment for you on the ground because they don't like your politics or because you're not on the same side. And the Kawira case is very clear that she was impeached for the first time even before she established her bureaucracy, before she named her ministers, the CECs. So, and governors do not play the party politics because there's a bit of a disconnect between the parties and the devolved systems. And at times, you might realize that you've been actually impeached by your own party or MCS from your own party.
The county assembly.
MCS from your own party. And because the law has allowed independent governors, where a governor has no MCS, like the case of Kawira, the situation even becomes that much more complicated. So there should be a clear threshold for impeachment. It shouldn't be easy to just, take a governor out of office. Yet it's nearly impossible under the current dispensation to remove an MCA or a member of parliament. I'll leave that at that. So on the issue of accountability, we need to understand, first of all, there are 47 county governments. And they will not all have issues at the same time. And that the issues that a county government has this term may not necessarily be the same issues they have the next term. A brother here had a very rough time with his MCS in the first term. And, it became impossible to run that county. So much so that he actually requested the Council of Governors to support him for the dissolution of the county. And it went full cycle. And when they realized that the county was going to be dissolved, they sobered up. And then in the second term, he had more peace. He did a lot of good work, So sometimes it's the toxicity of the politics. You might find a county that's very well run one term, and then next term things don't go because the tone at the top also has an impact. Having said that, of course we could all improve at all levels. Accountability issues are not a preserve of the county issues. Of the county government. Every other day we see a headline in the newspapers about someone being awarded a contract they didn't even apply for at the national level. But it's not given
by a mere email.
And via email. But it's not given the same castigation as issues are at the national level, at the county level. So issues of governance, misgovernance, corruption issues are across the board. It's, and we have 47 counties. How do we then deal with these issues?
Okay.
In my view, corruption issues should be dealt with on an individual case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Each arising matter should be prosecuted on its own merit, and the agencies should work quietly, come up with cases that are watertight. It should not be politicized, right? And then, individual accountability, as you say, individual accountability, because they are chief officers, they are ministers, they are procurement officers, they are payroll managers. Individual accountability should be strengthened.
Okay.
Yes, while governors take political responsibility for the happenings in their country.
Okay. And coming to you, Mr. Kibara, and
yes.
Earlier on you talked about efficiency, effectiveness, and the need for service delivery to be at the doorstep of the Mwananchi. And here you have very critical institutions established by Katiba, that is the Office of the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget, who report to the people of Kenya through the National Assembly and the county assemblies. Even as much focus and spotlight is on the governors, is enough being done by the county assemblies to substantively debate some of the issues that are of concern to the people and hold Governor Abdullahi and formally, as he said, but he was unfairly, he said, approached by the MCS. Are they substantively holding the county assembly, the county governors and managers to account based on some of the substantial issues that are pointed out by the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget?
They are definitely not holding the counties to account. One of the best examples that they are not doing that is the state of the county address. The original idea of having a state of the county address by the governor was to provide an opportunity for oversight by the county assemblies in terms of looking at the issues, looking at the performance of the governor, and also taking issues from the citizens to the floor of the county assembly, using the state of the county assembly, the state of the county speech by the governor. I have not seen any serious examination of the state of the county addressed by any county assembly.
Okay.
The other major challenge with the county assemblies is they adopted a patronage approach to devolution, where you say if the governor is not doing what we want as individuals, not as representatives of the people, then we are going to deal with the person. And we saw very many cases of that. And Professor Kibwana's experience was the best example of that. Because Professor Kibwana actually represented the original intent of devolution, where you are trying to clear the mess that was created by the centralized system by bringing in the people's chosen grassroots representatives to come and discuss governance in terms of resources, in terms of priorities, in terms of accountability. Yet, when these people came, they saw themselves as beneficiaries of patronage. So immediately the trip started to go all over the world. In fact, there are a number of countries where they were banned from ever stepping there, because they would bring so many big delegations that the country couldn't even handle them in terms of protocol. So that is where we went wrong. The approach of devolution as business as usual, you know. So I remember, because I was then PS when we started this process, and I also served in the devolution committee and also the transition authority because of my capacity as the PS for justice. The first ministers, the ministers who were then serving, many of them did not want to become governors. Because they said, what is a governor, you know? That time it had not dawned on them that the system could be abused. And therefore, there would be a lot of patronage resources coming with the office of the governor.
Okay.
So in the initial running, you could see very many people who had the capacity to become governors of the areas kept off.
Okay.
But when they saw, it's business as usual.
Yeah.
This is a patronage system. The next one was a real big problem.
Okay.
And then the issue of the county representatives were initially very poorly remunerated under the original arrangement. So in the campaign to get higher remuneration, I think they did a lot of compromises.
Okay.
Then probably the core of this failure of the system was the lack of civic education. It was understood from the very beginning that there would be massive civic education before we implemented county governments. So you are then bringing people who really have no idea what devolution is about and giving them powers to oversight. Okay. So we need to correct that, go back to a proper civic education.
Which is an all-round accountability mechanism.
Yes.
Or a call that ought to be across the devolved units. Yes, Dr. Lee.
Now, two things. I want to give a rejoinder to two things mentioned, especially from Governor for Kivuta. True, what I spoke about the Big Bang, and PS can bear me witness. The resources that were assigned to the function that went to the counties were not based on anything. If today you went back for the last 2-3 cycles now of devolution or the devolution money that have gone to the counties, it has not been costed. And we are at the point now, what he mentioned, I agree with him, what we are currently doing, which we have actually concluded on the unbundling of the functions, the elements that I mentioned, is what Governor has mentioned, the indicative figure of 272 billion, which still is not based on science. We have still gone back to the same formula over budget rationalization. If we went back to scientific costing, which now is a preserve of CRA, we would be talking about different figures that we are mentioning.
Upwards or downwards?
Scientifically, definitely it would be upwards.
So many more resources should be going to the counties.
Yes, should be going to the counties, right? So what we are doing now progressively is we have unbundled those functions. It will be gazetted in due time, but we have proceeded now with the second part of that. That is because after the transfer of functions, we must be able to identify the resources, and that's why we came up with that indicative figure. Now we are going to the costing of those functions, and we are working with CRA to ensure that those functions now that have been unbundled are costed, so that we are looking at, in the near future, where resources will be available, then the counties will be able to get more resources to that. And again, also, good to note what Governor, Vice Chair COG has said, mentioned. Some of the functions, again, that have now gone to the counties had no budgetary allocations before. And so now we have to be able to allocate funds to the same. Like he gave a very good example of ECDs. But then we have also come to realize, because resources to those functions were not only monetary, we also have assets that were attached to the same function. Like we're talking about ECDs. We have now about 7 counties which had the former defunct municipal councils. And they had ECD centers and county primary schools. Now, some of this land and buildings belong to the ECD, and so it has to be transferred to that particular county government. So beside the lack of financial allocation to a function, there could be assets that are assigned or would be able to go with that function. So just to be able to clarify on that, and yes, there is a lot to be done on the issue of the implementation of the 2 functions. And if you look across, what we have discussed is the county government. The question is, what about national government functions? Are they being implemented as it was designed in the Constitution? Because we keep focusing on the counties. I think because largely, majority of the functions that are service-driven to the public, are in the counties. But the question would be, some of these functions that have been left to the national government, what happens or what has happened to them? And that is why in this financial year, IGRTC has one of the mandates to assess the implementation of devolved functions, not only to the counties, but also to the national government. And we desire, in due course, that we will have a report And we are going to get the input of some of these pioneer governors, some of the players, CIOC officers and commissioners, TA, so that we want to understand what was designed in the Constitution. What was the spirit? What was the real intention of some of these functions? Then we go back to now, is the county government performing as it was intended? Is the national government doing what it was supposed to do? Like you mentioned about civic education, that goes to capacity building. I was, when we were chatting as we were coming in with the governor, I said, anyone who's working now in public service, how many people, both in the national government and the county government, understand what devolution is? Some even have been employed. They are 2-3 years in service. Do they understand what devolution is? So it comes to civic education and capacity building. That is now the next circle. When we ask me, when we are taking stock of devolution or the Constitution, those are some of the things that we should not lose sight of. That within the next 5 years, 10 years, we need to go back to do civic education and further capacity building to both the public and government and public servants.
And coming to you, Governor Ahmed, because this is also important as well, gentlemen, because it's on source revenue and the potential of the counties in terms of their revenues and sustenance. As of March, only 7 counties surpassed their on-source revenue. The average collection for all counties against the target was 51.3%. A recent study by the Commission on Revenue Allocation with the support of the World Bank on comprehensive on-source revenue potential and tax gap indicated that the total annual revenue potential for county governments is approximately 93 billion, but the annual average collection stands at 38, which is a difference of about 45 billion. Given that costing was not done as the CEO had mentioned, Governor, then what needs to happen in terms of upscaling this on-source revenue and the appreciation that different counties have different potentials?
Ayub, this matter of on-source revenue actually comes up every time we talk about counties not being adequately funded. Every time we have a debate about division of revenue, we are reminded that we are not collecting enough of our on-source revenue. Now, I want to make it very clear that on-source revenue is not a factor in the division of revenue. It's not. The pot that is to be divided in the vertical share, you're supposed to have that pot determined based on the CRA formula and then split. But of course, we should all work towards optimizing our on-source revenue in addition to equitable share, right? I want to make it very clear that on-source revenue is not a factor in equitable share. Having said that, these are just targets. Even KRA doesn't meet its targets, right? If you set low targets for your people, they will not work as hard. But increasingly, many of the counties are actually improving. But the way we fashioned and carved out and designed our counties, we knew that counties will not all have the same capability to raise revenue. Just a very typical example. If Nairobi increased its on-source revenue by 10%, they'll probably collect a few billion more. If I increased the on-source revenue of Wajir County by 100%, I will probably collect a few millions more. Actually, this last year, we increased by 300%, from 46 million to 160 million, right? But that doesn't pay half of my wage bill for 1 month. So these functions that were devolved were functions that were initially being funded by national government. Having said that, we should endeavor to always increase. Kwale County, for instance, now is claiming 1.9 billion in mineral royalties from the national government. If the oil in Turkana were as envisaged, commercialized, probably Turkana will be the richest county. So the ability of individual counties to actually collect revenue has got to do with how they have been endowed and how we have been investing our national resources for the last 60 or so years. If there's no road to go to my county, how do I even bring my produce here? So the economic activity is actually what determines how much you're able to collect. But even within those restraints that we have in individual counties, every individual county is attempting to increase its own source revenue and optimize through automation, through looking at new on-source revenues, through the valuation roles. A lot of counties are not earning what is called silo compensation in lieu of rates by national government. National government installations are not paying rates for their installations within counties as they ought to. The only county that has so far under that, I think, is Laikipia County. Yet KPLC will disconnect you on the electricity the next day if you don't pay. So there are wider issues to be discussed here. Yes, counties need to increase their own source revenue.
Yes.
But also we need to invest equally in the counties, even from the national pot, because a lot of the money, with all the challenges that we have of money, still remains at the national level. Counties today get 10% of the budget, if not less. Counties get about 15% of the shareable revenue, and the shareable revenue is not the national budget. And they're getting 15% of the shareable revenue, or about 10% of the budget for those critical functions: health, water, agriculture, right? Where does the 90% go? At the national level.
Okay.
Right.
Governor Kibwana, and because if you look at between the financial years 2018-19 and 21-22, the annual targets in terms of the county government's on-source revenue generation has been on steady decline from 74.8%, 65.2%, 64.2%, and 59.4%. Yes, he mentions capacities in terms of meeting these targets, but ideally, this, if compounded by the late disbursement, and he will tell us as to the last 3 months that they have gone unpaid and delayed salaries, compounded by delays in terms of the exchequer release to the counties, doesn't this further complicate what's meant to be a process that ought to have brought services nearer to the people, which is devolution? And how should these problematic issues that are double-edged be addressed?
Well, just to allow me also one important question that you asked of the potential of county assemblies to do oversight. Of course, the question of technical capacity of the county assembly people so that they are able to do that oversight, apart from the broad question of civic education and so on. And there is a situation which is not very clear. To what extent does the county assembly oversight, and what does the Senate do? Because sometimes there is an overlap, so that the county assembly will oversight, and then Senate oversight, and they sometimes have different results. So that is something that requires to be streamlined. Unfortunately, the political parties, like let us say in a particular region, there's a dominant political party. They don't seem to take interest also in terms of oversighting the performance of the governments of their political parties. And actually the political parties, we don't focus a lot on what is it that they deliver in terms of development at those levels. And that is something else, if developed, would also offer another avenue for oversight. Now, I think it's important for counties to raise as much of on-source revenue as possible, because if you do that, most of that is used for development. Most of it is, this is the money that you could use for development. So the more you raise, the better it is for that particular county. And I agree with what my colleague has said in terms of within the Constitution, counties were given little avenues for raising revenue. You know, the levies, the most important thing being the land, taxes, and that's why we talked about the valuation rolls. So at independence, actually, in 1963, the regions had more taxation power because they even got money from import taxes, a percentage of import taxes of oil, of whatever, it was. So within the design of the taxation power of counties, within the Constitution, actually they're incapacitated. They may not be able to raise as much as they could. But having said that, there is underperformance in terms of what they can raise, and that question must be squarely addressed. And some of it is political, because a governor says, if I ask for a lot of like the land rates, if I ask for a lot of that, I'm going to be in trouble and I'm going to lose votes. And that is why they keep on saying we keep on saying, let me include myself there, that now you don't have to pay for the past period of your land rates. Just pay now going forward, and there's no interest and so on. So I think also the people must know that when they are taxed, that money goes into doing the development within the county. So that is a conversation that has to happen, and part of it is through the civic education, and the pending bills could also be to some extent solved by, if you raise more, then it means that some of those pending bills you can also pay. Of course, there are pending bills because of late disbursement. So I think that's I like the fact that there is digital, digital solutions.
Yes.
That is a good thing. But certainly governors need to focus on that, and it's good that there are counties which show improvement, like Kitui, Kirinyaga, Samburu. Governor said Wajir. One has to see that improvement every year.
Yes, please.
I think we need to always be very careful when we hear that argument about own source revenue. Because, as the governor says, it's mostly used as an excuse by the central government, the national government, to indicate that if these people could only do their work, they wouldn't need money from us, which is not true. Counties are supposed to be substantially funded through the shareable revenue, not through their own source revenue. Their own source revenue is so minimal compared to their needs that it cannot be used to develop the counties. We need to be very clear on that. Then the values and national direction is set by the national government. If you have set values of an efficient, effective, prudent national government, that will go to the subnational units, which are the counties in the case of Kenya. So you will not set a wasteful culture at the national level and expect there to be a prudent culture in the counties. Because this revenue is coming through the same system. It's coming through the treasury. It's coming through the audit system of the Auditor General, coming through the controller. All these national institutions set the tone for the kind of leadership that should be there in terms of proper use of public resources. So that tone is set at the national level, and then it percolates all the way down. For instance, one major diversion from the original design of devolution was the fact that the Constitution designed a cooperative model of devolution, not a competitive model of devolution. So it was not expected that the national government would be in competition with the counties in terms of serving the people. But from the very beginning, you could see that tone of the national government setting itself as a competitor to the counties.
And is that where you can attribute the problem then, having served as a member of the Transition Authority? Because one of the other major challenges is the timely availability of resources for the delivery of services, for instance. And the governor is here, and he can tell us, because the last time we spoke with the chairperson of the Council of Governors Finance Committee, Fernandez Barasa, Kakamega County, he said they have gone unpaid for the last 3 months. So do you then squarely lay that blame at the doorstep of the national government in the, what appears, in quotes, deliberate delay of cash transfers to the counties, and bearing the brunt are here, the governors who say they have not paid wages, some development projects have stalled, and the challenges that keep on compounding, but appears to be then spotlighting one major part of the problem while leaving out the other. For example, if you have mentioned the national government undertakes foreign affairs, foreign policy and international trade. In the financial year 2023-24, the first 9 months, the national government spent 4.11 billion Kenya shillings on foreign travels alone. That's extra on top of what was earlier planned. Clearly, there are many other roles, for example, police services, the courts, the national economic policy and planning, monetary policy, intellectual property rights, consumer protection, education policy and standards. And do we then need to have this holistic approach of calling for accountability on both ends, and especially the national government, in the delayed disbursement of funding to the counties?
Yes, that's actually where the issue is. That if it's not by accident that the national government is given the role of setting policy and setting standards nationally. That means, for instance, sector standards ought to have been developed very early. In terms of, for instance, what is the unit cost of delivering health? And that ought to be availed to all the counties, that this is the standard best practice for delivering health. And then those sector standard can be taken down to all levels of government. So that, for instance, if the standard for a hospital is that this is the ratio of doctors to the patients, then that can be a national standard where every county can be asked to aspire to reach that national standard. Same with agriculture. If, for instance, the per acre produce for maize is supposed to be certain number of bags, then that can be a national standard against which every county can be questioned. And citizens are able to hold counties to account and tell them that the national standard for producing maize in Kenya per acre is this much. And our county is below that by this much. That's the work of the national government, set sector standards, which can then be domesticated by the counties. That has not been very well done. The same thing with performance management. Performance management standards are supposed to be set by the national government. And then counties can be able to say, okay, so actually if my civil servants are performing to this level, then I'm all right. You know, I'm meeting the national standards. But because maybe I have special standards that are a problem, special factors that are a problem in my county, then maybe I can be excused to operate at this lower level. But when you have no standards, then that's when you have all these so-called manifestos coming with governance that I'm going to deliver this, for my re-election. Not for the county's development, but for me to be re-elected. I'm going to give everybody a cow. I'm going to give, basically to be popular, and not necessarily to deliver services.
Yes, Dr. Chepkwony.
Now, I want to just make a comment on one of the issues that has been mentioned on the status of the assessment and reports from COB and OAG. The overlap mandate of oversight between the County Assembly and the Senate. I sat in Nandi County Assembly for 10 years. Every financial year, we received COB reports and OAG reports. If I asked everyone seated here, if they have ever seen any county assembly summoning the governor to appear and explain on any of the issues that have been raised by either OAG or COB, it's not in record. The same county assemblies that review the reports from COB and OAG, their reports don't find space anywhere. However, the same report that has been shared to the county assemblies and National Assembly and Senate, that is where you see the Senate will always summon the governors and the county executives to come and explain further. But the oversight then, the question would be, what happened to the oversight of the county assemblies? And why is it more pronounced at the Senate? So those are some of the things that we're saying. Now, some of these governance gaps, that is why when Kibara talks about at the county level that we have gone to patronage. That is one of the issues, because from my experience there, going even down to the entire country, all the 47 county assemblies, there is an issue that needs to be addressed there so that we reduce on that overlap between the Senate and national and the county assemblies, and also to give exclusive independence to the county assemblies. The patronage issue, which is very clear, has always been tied to one thing, and I think I want to really appreciate the governors and the National Assembly and the Senate, now that they have come to the realization that this issue of dependence on the executive for financial allocation to the county assemblies is what is creating that problem, beside the political parties, from my experience. But at the point where I sit now, again, I've also established, even when you talk about the issue of the county assemblies and governors not cooperating or working together, where the impeachments are coming from is intragovernmental relations. We have a problem in that intragovernmental relations, where you have deputy governors and governors. There are some who are not working hand in hand. County assemblies and county governors. It is a flip-flop. And that space, there is never a guideline on how that intragovernmental relations will be handled. And that is a space that those are now some of the issues for me that we are looking that in the future, as we discuss and review on what the devolution system of governance has brought to this country. Those are some of the loopholes for me that we should be looking at how to address them.
All right, Dr. Before I go to the governor on the delayed disbursement of cash from the exchequer, you have mentioned those two critical institutions established by the Constitution, the Office of the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget, and they produce those reports for consumption by the County Assembly. Let me take you to this ruling by the Supreme Court on the 7th of October 2022. And the Apex Court ruled that the county assemblies are the first-tier power centers of oversight of revenues of county governments. And then that's why we have, as you have mentioned, the Senate and the Public Accounts Committee, which are granted quasi-judicial powers that look into these issues. But ideally, you have, as you have mentioned, some of these issues largely happen by a greater degree at the Senate level and at the National Assembly level. What does that tell us about then the capacity and the technical ability of the county assemblies across the country? Because ideally they're supposed to be the national assemblies of the 47 counties and holding the gentlemen who are the county executive heads to account at that level. But it appears even granted these procedural processes, still some of the grounds you see the threshold, the Senate keeps on taking them back, that it doesn't satisfy the constitutional threshold. More needs to be done, is it? And how can that be attained?
I would have agreed to that statement as of 2013 to 2017, where, because it was a new old thing to the entire nation, I would have agreed to that if a county assembly would have been declared to lack capacity. But 15 years later, lack of capacity, I think the problem, from my assessment, is more on the political framework, the political tone that is set. And the patronage, you see, it has become a tradition. What we have been able to do good as a country, based on the new governance structure or devolution structure, we have really excelled in it. What also we have been able to do bad, we are doing well.
Yes, Governor.
And Ayub, I wish Prof, now that he's out and he's served his 2 terms, had written a book about what is and what ought. Maybe one day I will, because there are things that I can't say now that I'm still in office. About the Senate and the assemblies. Our brother here mentioned about why governors don't appear in front of the MCS to answer some of those questions. See, the structure that we took for the counties is a replica of the structure that we have at the national level. it wasn't envisaged that the governor will be summoned to the assembly to answer every little query, because they are ministers. They are accounting officers. The governor is the head of the government and takes political responsibility. If things are so badly run and without the politics of things, it's evident that there's a problem. That's why the impeachment law is there. But our assemblies summon our CECs. They have committees pretty much fashioned in the same way as committees at the national parliament. What we're seeing here, and this has been progressive, is that Senate has replicated the exact committees that are at the county assemblies. And now we, as governors, are spending as much time as our CECs are spending with the assemblies in the Senate. And something needs to be done. Because the latest one now is that every level 4 hospital is regarded as a public investment and has to produce its own accounts. And the governor has to appear before the Senate to explain the accounts of every level 4 hospital. Now, I have 6 of them. I am converting another 8. And I hope to do another 4 before I leave. That's 6 plus 8 plus 4. Those are how many?
16.
16. So 16 times I will have to appear before Public Investment Committee for those level 4 hospitals. And I have also a level 5. I mean, it wasn't designed that way. I don't think that's how it was supposed to be. So that duplication needs to be addressed. I'll say a few other things. I agree with Prof on the issue of Article 209, the limited resource raising capacity. That's why I said the functions that were devolved were initially being funded by national government. They ought to be funded by national government. On source revenue, we optimize. The competitive, as opposed to the cooperative model of intergovernmental relations. I've said this before. I think the problem is the national government has made it existential to claw back on devolved functions. And this is because of our politics. They want to be present at the grassroots. They want to be seen to be present at the grassroots. There are mechanisms for them to enforce policy issues. And that's why the issue of conditional grants was envisaged in our constitution. That over and above the equitable share, national government can think of something from a policy perspective and fund it directly with respect to devolved functions through the counties. That's not happening. They are with us on the ground. They are competing with us. They are doing boreholes. They are doing pans, which they ought not to. I'll give you a typical example. On the issue of RMLF, Road Maintenance Levy Fund, the Council of Governors has now gone to court and frozen that through the court. Why? Whereas the Constitution is very clear that there are only 2 types of roads, national trunk roads and county roads. All the RMLF money is going through Kenha, Kura, and Kera. Not a shilling has been allocated to the county government. So how are we supposed to maintain county roads? And when we started in the first cohort of devolution, we used to get a portion of the KRB,
the Kenya Roads Board,
RMLF monies. But now, over time, National Assembly has, given themselves the powers to deny counties, which powers they don't have under the Constitution, and that's why the court agreed with us. So this clawback that is being made existential by national government is a threat to devolution. 2, we are creating too many levels of executive. The Constitution is very clear that there are only 2 levels of government. The national government and the county government. And those are the ones to do the execution. Why we're having problems with the MCS is because they also want ward funds that they execute. Just the way MPs
have CDF.
The women MPs have
NGAF.
The NGAF. So I think these are things that we should discuss as a country and say, is it really sustainable? On travels, it is impossible, as it is, for a governor to hold his assembly to account for troubles. And when those reports of the COB come, they will just say, this county spends so much on travel. They will not split between the county assembly and
The executive.
And the executive. And when you go down, drill down into the numbers, you'll realize 70% of the travel is as a result of the MCS.
Okay. Well noted. Let's now sample the feedback, and I give you the last few seconds for you.
On delays of funding. Just on delays of funding.
Yeah, I'll give you the final word. Let's first of all check what the public is saying. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. And we are sampling your feedback here on the broadcast. I am Kakedu says, what does empower lack is the will to do the right thing, which is the implementation of the 2010 Constitution. It's in its totality. Devolution has transformed our country, especially the rural areas. That's a fact. Delaying or reducing county funds is killing devolution. Engineer Lazaro says for devolution to realize its goal, law should be amended to caution wastage in counties, things like bloated workforce, unnecessary safaris, pending bills, or uncompleted projects. We must elect people who understand the devolved system of governance. Next is Frank Orinda says governors and MCS have adopted working relationships at the expense of oversight akin to patronage approach. So long as they share the cake, they are good to go. They should be corrected since it's stifling devolution. Okelo Mwalimu says Kenyans haven't fully ripped from devolution due to the following monsters: runaway corruption, bloated wage bill, and existence of ghost workers, poor governance, or ineptitude. To cure these counties should be merged as anti-graft bodies tighten the noose on graft lords. Gode Barasawere says this leadership marriage between Raila and Ruto should resolve the late disbursement of funds to counties. Odinga said he donated experts to aid the government to avert a crisis. So Mbadi, he means the CS National Treasury and Economic Planning should give a solution here. Clement says devolution hasn't been a success in Nyanza counties due to the voting along the party line. Party loyalists are rewarded county jobs even if unqualified ghost workers menace party MCS cannot also oversight the governors. Just but a few of your feedback on X. Yes, starting with you, Governor. Your closing remarks. Of course, this is an extensive topic and needs more time.
Yes. I really think that the first comment about full implementation of the Constitution, that is a very critical thing in this country. Many people in leadership, particularly at the national level, don't still believe that they should be guided and they should implement the Constitution in various aspects, including what we are discussing, devolution. And yet, for example, when the president was campaigning, one of his center parts of the campaign was that he was very devolution minded. So I think, and that is what the young people, the Gen Zs, have been asking for: implement the Constitution in full. And something actually that we didn't discuss was to what extent are youth involved in devolution? Because again, some of the problems that we have could be sorted out if there is a lot of involvement of young people within devolution.
Okay.
There are those challenges that have been pointed out, and again, even as we say, national level still believes in centralization, but also the counties should address the challenges that citizens are asking every time.
Thank you. Yes, Bonap, yes.
Yes, we must move away from patronage as a system of running our institutions so that we go to the intended constitutional model, which is merit-based, based on equity, and based on a competitive model. We should not be having any room for people to build political careers through devolution, whether in terms of patronizing the citizens by giving them goodies, or by trying to compete with the local managers of devolution. And that is our biggest problem, where the national government feels that is a competitor and it must prove that it's better than the county government.
Yes.
That would include trying to undermine by way of denying resources to the counties, which is what collapsed the original attempt at devolution in the 60s.
Okay.
So we must move away from that and allow governors to manage the counties on the basis of the needs of the people.
Thank you.
And on the basis of our merit-based system.
Thank you. Yes, Governor, you had a point earlier.
Yes. Yeah. For my closing remark, just on funding of delays. I mean, delays in funding. Now, and where there is a will, there is a way. I believe, with all our money problems, Treasury and CBK can find 34 billion shillings to put in a fund account, because that's what counties require now per month, to ensure that funds are released every month. And this is a suggestion we have made. It is not fair for a nurse at Kenyatta National Hospital to earn her salary by the end of the month, and for a nurse at the county level to wait for her salary for 3 months. Devolution has been the best thing that we have taken out of our 2010 constitution. It still remains the best takeout of that constitution. It has challenges, yes, but it can be improved. I believe that the worst run devolved system for the average Kenyan is still better than the best run centralized system. We cannot go back to a centralized system. We can only improve the devolved system. I thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Dr.
Thank you. I think for me, my closing remark would be, I think it is time for us to write the devolution story. We spoke about devolution story. We dreamt about devolution story. And that is why we have a devolved system of government now. But it is time that we write about our successes as a country, so that we are able to appreciate what really it has been able to do, and where we find that there are gaps that for us to go to the future, then it is time to also make corrective measures midway. Because in my honest anticipation, sitting where I am, I think we would need another 20 years to fully implement the Constitution, as the professor has said. So some of the measures that need to be done, either political, legislative, or administrative, we need to be able to correct those issues now for us to progress faster to achievement of the implementation of the Constitution.
Thank you. And Prof, it's 2 years since you left power. What have you been up to? You rarely comment on national issues, except I found you in an online meeting during the Gen Z protests.
Yes. So those are good guys. Because they want our country to change. And I don't shy away from conversations with young people. I mentor young people.
Yes.
Of course, I enjoy my grandchildren, family. And I am looking around because there is a lot of work to be done in this country. Still.
Bado uko.
Bado niko.
Thank you.
They were infiltrated.
Gentlemen, your time is appreciated. Dr. Chepkwony.
Thank you so
Dr. Chepkwony, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The CEO of the Intergovernmental Relations and Technical Committee, FCP, Ahmed Abdullahi, thank you. Governor Wajir County, the Deputy Vice Chair of COG. P.S. Gishira, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. To more engagements with you here on the broadcast, and Professor Kivutha Kibwana formerly served as Makueni County Governor. And thanks to you too for working up with us here on the broadcast. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Social Hour is up next with Safina Chiengo Uma, QT and CJ Atema, and we'll see you tomorrow morning here on the broadcast. Till then, good morning.